Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。US President Donald Trump has literally pulled the United States out of the race to lead the world into a greener future, handing victory to China, a country that already leads the way in environmental protection and green technology. Foreign policy is lamenting the Trump administration's constant moves to ruin the planet, including colluding with oil and gas companies for quote-unquote dark money in exchange for the killing of environmental policies and the promotion of a new drill baby drill stance. Whereas the Cold War had its arms race, they wrote, the 21st century is defined by the quest for dominance in the clean energy economy, and China is winning. And this year, China made a massive achievement that you're not likely to hear about in the Western media. Carbon emissions fell, while GDP went up. So how did they do it? Well, today we'll speak with Minji, a reporter from China BizBuzz, who's been following developments. Let's go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. Foreign policy is terrified that China will win the so-called race for supremacy in green technology, as US President Donald Trump works to send his country back to the carbon dark ages. In a piece titled, How Trump Lost the War on Climate to China, Nigel Purvis, CEO of Climate Advisors, warns that Trump has taken hundreds of millions of dollars in what he calls dark money from oil and gas magnates in exchange for the complete annihilation of that country's climate policies. Nigel even likens the so-called race to climate supremacy to the Cold War, writing, whereas the Cold War had its arms race, the 21st century is defined by a different race, the quest for dominance in the clean energy economy, shaped in part by the growing importance of energy-hungry artificial intelligence. He continues, now Trump is ceding the field entirely, which amounts to nothing short of unilateral disarmament. His tax cuts have gutted US clean energy incentives. He has withheld financial support for renewable energy and used red tape to kill off existing projects. Meanwhile, China's investments in green solutions continue. Well, he's right there. China has led the world in green technology already for years, and its achievements were never really matched by the US, if we're being completely honest. As Nigel correctly points out, China already dominates manufacturing in solar panels, batteries, and wind turbines. And he adds, China will soon hold, if it does not already, an insurmountable lead in the technologies that will power the new clean global economy. But that's a bad thing, according to Nigel from Climate Advisors. He continues, unfortunately, Trump's policies are already pushing the world toward China and away from the United States. Well, Nigel, I think you might just need to get used to it. The world has been pivoting towards China for a wee while already, in case you haven't noticed, for its stability, fairness, non-interference, high quality and cost-effective nature. And not just in green technology. China single-handedly turned solar panels into something everyone could afford, including the poorest of developing nations. China's EVs are making third-world countries much, much cleaner, and China produces more green energy than anyone else by a long shot. And in the first quarter of this year, China achieved a massive win for the planet that you'll never hear about in Western media. This from City News Service. China's carbon dioxide emissions in the first quarter of 2025 fell 1.6% from a year earlier, even as the nation's 5% economic growth placed heavier demands on power supply. It's the first time that emissions reduction has occurred during a period of strong growth, according to UK-based climate change website Carbon Brief, dispelling the belief that economic development comes at the expense of the environment. So let me just say that one more time for clarity, you guys. While increasing its GDP by 5%, China at the same time reduced carbon emissions by 1.6%, the first time that has ever been achieved. Sounds pretty amazing. And to talk about it, I want to bring in Minji, who's on the line from Shanghai and is a reporter from China BizBuzz. And she's been following the situation. Minji, that's really quite an achievement, especially considering that GDP growth has historically been tied directly with increased carbon emissions. So what has China done differently to turn the pollution ship around?
Hi, Andy. Thank you for inviting me on the show. I really like how you concluded the report, that the research report you said. You said it's a massive win for the planet. Exactly, because I don't know why there are always reports sort of just like the foreign policy one, which puts it as like a U.S.-China races in green technology, which isn't, because we really need to save ourselves from ourselves for the planet, right? So we should all pray for China to win this war, because it's not China versus US, it's China and the whole world and the US versus ourselves, and to save the planet. And coming to the research you were talking about, I want to point out it is just one academic research based on publicly available government and commercial data. There are a lot of researchers like this, so I don't want to make it sound like China has done its job. There's nothing more to do and it's all good. Of course, there are loads of work to ahead of it. And the answer to your question, a simple answer will be technology in two ways. So first of all, it's the technology of producing GDP more efficiently. That is measured by energy intensity, which is the energy consumed to produce every unit of GDP. Basically, meaning you're using less energy to produce the same amount of money or GDP growth, right? And the second part is green technology, green energy, clean energy, or renewable energy, whichever way you call it. So China has invested so much money and efforts into the green energy section, and the result is pretty clear.
So, with all of these massive green achievements that China has made and is making, why do you think it is that China is still painted as kind of a massive polluter and a detriment to the planet at large?
That is a very good question, and I think you should ask Trump, because he is the one who often says that, right? But consider this: when Trump says all that, and if you calculate in per capita energy, per capita carbon emissions, U.S. is actually the biggest polluter in the world. When you count only major economies, because they're like very small examples. So of course we need to talk about in per capita terms, because why should one Chinese or one South African or one Indonesia equal lesser than one American, right? So that question should be asked to him. But for example, the research you cited of the carbon brief is often cited in many climate change reports in Western media, but you haven't seen that one cited, right? You read a lot of Western media, you don't see that one. So I guess one reason is that when China makes some achievements, they don't report it, or they report negative effects. And also it's like an easy target to fool Western readers, especially because China is the biggest manufacturer. And when you manufacture, when you have factories, you will have carbon emission. That's simple fact. And so in that way, it's very easy to just attack China in the total amount of carbon emission without thinking the stuff you use is made in China, which means the fridge you're using at home, that emission is counted on China's head when you're enjoying the fridge, right?
Exactly. So in terms of per capita carbon emissions, the US is still at the top, despite not producing most of their goods. So they exported all of their carbon emissions to China decades ago, which a lot of people don't take into account. But there are a lot of other anti-China tropes pushed by the collective West when it comes to pollution and the environment. Most people don't know, for example, that China produces more green energy than any other country, that China's planted more trees than many other countries combined, even on a per capita basis, and that China's literally made a green technology like solar panels and EVs affordable for everyone. But what I was wondering, what do you think is the biggest myth about China and the environment going around in the West?
As a myth of, I think, because I'm a business reporter and very follow closely to the climate change movement. So I've always had this question, actually, rather than an answer. So if climate change is a top priority, like many Western media or many Western country leaders say, it is the top priority for all human race, then why would they consider green technology, for example, electric vehicles from China, to be overcapacity? Think about this.
Or to be a national security risk, right?
Right, or national security risk, which is even more ridiculous. So think about it. If we all need to make the climate change better, then we need to promote green technology, and especially affordable ones. You said that, like China actually made the cost of green technology a lot more affordable. So in the last 10 years, green energy, especially solar panels and wind turbines, the cost of them were down by 80 to 90%, largely because of China, because China did it in scale. You only could reach that kind of price with scale manufacturing, right? So then to make the planet better, we should have the Chinese technology, all those products used by everyone, right? Because it's affordable. There's some fault on the Chinese part too, I have to say, because like Chinese, even the younger generation, whether individuals or government, there's a tradition of doing more than saying. So I think they don't promote themselves enough, doing things that's pragmatic, but they don't necessarily shout it to the world, right?
A lot to think about. Minji from China Business Buzz, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And if you want to follow Minji on Twitter or X, the address is on screen now. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Were you surprised by China proving that you can improve the economy while reducing emissions? And do you think Trump will reconsider his deal with the big oil devil? Do let me know down below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.